There is a lot going on in the markets. Today was a especially crazy day. We were up 6% at the end of the day, and that signifies a bull market, which is unbelievable. So it's a 20% bounce from the lows. But in this video, what we're trying to answer is this question: is the U.S. economy crashing, or will the U.S. economy crash? And the second part of the question that we want to answer, of course, is will the stimulus plan stop that? Today, we got some really bad news on unemployment claims. These are the things that give us a foreshadowing of what the unemployment rate will be. And these things jumped by 3.3 million people applying for unemployment benefits. So every 1.5 million, that adds about a percentage point onto the unemployment rate. So with 3.3 million people applying, that generally gives you a rate that's going to be around 5.5, somewhere between 5.5 to 6% on the unemployment rate. And that is catastrophic. I mean, that's horrific. And this is the shape of the information that's going to be coming over the next days and weeks and months, because we've shut down the U.S. economy. And essentially, it's just an unbelievable thing to do. What carnage that brings to the economy is unbelievable. And I don't want to downplay what's going on with the coronavirus. That's horrific. That incurs deaths. But I will tell you that when you wreck an economy the size of the US, over $20 trillion, and you make it contract, you're going to cause a lot of economic damage and health damage to those people that have lost their jobs, that aren't receiving a paycheck, that they're not going to be able to buy food to put on the table for their families. It is going to be a very, very difficult time going forward. Now, the good news is that the stimulus plan is going to help ameliorate or lessen the impact of what we're doing right now to the U.S. economy. So I'll tell you this: as far as is the U.S. economy crashing? You bet it is. When you shut it down and tell people they can't go out or they can't gather in groups larger than 2 or 10, you're going to have a major problem. And you're going to have an economy that's going to shrink rapidly. And we're going to start seeing those numbers over the days and weeks. So the economy is crashing. It's a question of how long it's going to crash for. So with the stimulus plan, the total amount of money that's going to be spent from the headline number, assuming the House passes it tomorrow, is about somewhere between $2 to $2.3 trillion. Now, within that, I want to point out that there's $500 billion goes to this thing called the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Now, you don't need to know what that is, but we do need to know is that Exchange Stabilization Fund is at the U.S. Treasury, and the Federal Reserve gets to utilize that to backstop all of their programs that they're incurring right now, that they're putting forward right now, and that includes backstopping the money markets, that includes backstopping primary dealers, but most importantly, it includes the Fed's ability to provide loans to major corporations and municipalities in the form of buying their debt. That's right, I said buying their debt, and they're going to use exchange-traded funds to do some of that. Now, that's really good news, because what happens with these companies that are totally under duress from what's happening with the shutdown is that they can issue debt that someone's going to buy. And that allows them to liquefy their balance sheet. In other words, get cash on the balance sheet to get them through this extraordinarily difficult time. So keep that in mind. That is a major component of this stimulus plan that just not enough people are talking about. So let me run through the major portions of the stimulus plan just really quickly. And a lot of these numbers are going to come from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. So check them out. They're fantastic. I really love the work that they do. But let's go down some of the things that they've got in this plan. So there's $260 billion for expanded and extending unemployment benefits. There's $290 billion to issue one-time checks. You're going to hear a lot about that. $1,200 for individuals, $2,400 for families. Going back to the expanded unemployment benefits, it's going to move from 3 months to 4 months, and you're going to get $600 million on top of it. I'm sorry, I wish it was $600 million, $600 per month on top of that. So that's really good news. And hopefully will get us through the next 4 months. There's going to be small business loans and grants to the tune of $377 billion. Now, you're probably wondering, like, okay, and you've done like almost 5 minutes of this thing. What is with the background that you have there? So what's going on with the background is this. So what I have is I've got small businesses, which is what we've got right here. And then we've got Rosie the Riveter right there on my right. And the reason why I put those forward is because small businesses are the backbone of the economy, as is low income and middle income workers. And this bill is going to help both of them. So Rosie the Riveter shows us what women could do when they were allowed to come into the workforce and help out during World War II and get us through really a crisis, World War II. And that's why I have her up there, and the small businesses, obviously, as I mentioned. So just keep that in mind. I mean, that's kind of the fun background that we have here. And that, of course, is the focus of the stimulus bill. So moving on within the stimulus bill, there's $510 billion for loan guarantees and loans for large businesses and governments. There's a lot of things for passenger airlines and cargo airlines. There's stuff for the Postal Service. And of course, what I talked about, that new Federal Reserve facility, there's like $454 billion. It may be larger than that. So we'll see what ends up coming out of the House, but I think that's what it's going to be, somewhere between 450 or $500 billion. There's, again, another $150 billion for state and local governments, $180 billion of healthcare related spending that we need. Obviously, these are desperate respirators and other PPE equipment for our medical frontliners there that absolutely need it. There's $42 billion for supporting the safety net, some stuff for SNAP, and boosting housing support. There's $45 billion for FEMA. There's $32 billion for education spending. There's cutting business taxes at $280 billion. And so the total is somewhere, the cost of this thing's between $2 to $2.3 trillion. Now, on that cutting of the taxes, what I want to point out for people is kind of an interesting provision. And you can take a look at this. The Tax Foundation has some wonderful research on that. One of the tax provisions in there that I think is fascinating is this thing called net operating losses. So in other words, if you have a net operating loss for the years 2018, 2019, and 2020, which is going to be a horrific year, you have a 5-year carryback on those losses. That translates into the ability for you to go back to profitable years when you paid the IRS money as a business, and going back to them and saying, now I've got losses. I want to carry those backwards. I want to recapture those taxes that I gave to the federal government. So that's something I think is really going to help out companies, and I think it's going to help out small businesses significantly. I'm not sure if there's a cap on it or the size of the companies that can take a look at that, but I think it's really important to keep an eye on that, because it's going to help liquefy these companies along with all the other provisions that are out there. But this is something that's really important. Okay, so what does this mean for stopping the recession that's coming? It's going to help, right? It's going to help slow this thing down. Because, of course, if we take a look at the amount of money that's being put forward here, $2.3 trillion, plus the Federal Reserve levering up the $450 billion or $500 billion to the tune of $4 trillion to buy debt or issue loans to companies, we're talking somewhere north of $5.5 to $6 trillion going back into the economy eventually that will help significantly. That's about 30% of GDP. So if we wipe out an entire quarter and then we replace it with this amount of money, that's really going to help the economy, right? That pretty much would offset 1 quarter per se of complete loss of GDP. All right, I'm euphemistically saying that, but you get the idea of where this is going. Now it's a question of how long this goes on for. That's the other question when it comes to the coronavirus. Who has control of that? Who can reopen up the economy, and when will those decisions get made? Well, it's not President Trump. That's the interesting aspect to this. It's the state governors that have the most control of what goes on in their states. So we want to focus on what's going on in the state of Washington, in the state of California, in the state of Illinois, and of course in New York City and the state of New York. Those governors will have much more control about whether or not they allow large groups to gather and whether or not they allow non-essential businesses to reopen. That's what we're waiting for. My guess is is that the president will roll forward maybe another week on some of the strictures they put out there as far as the CDC's recommendations, as far as groups not meeting larger than 10. But I think it's really going to be up to the governors. And at this point, I can't see them reopening up the economy anytime soon, which means that this rally in the stock market, while it's impressive, I think I want to caution everybody out there that the stimulus plan is going to help, but it's not going to solve this problem of reopening up a major economy. Again, it's going to be up to the governors, but it's like you're rebooting it. It's like you turned it off and then you hope when you turn it back on, everything will be fixed. I don't think that's the case. I think we're going to have societal shifts that are going to be much different from where we were previously. So getting back up to $20 trillion on the economy, I think is going to be really, really difficult in a short period of time. So be very cautious about those that say we're going to be back up and running easily. Be very cautious about people like Ben Bernanke who say, oh, this is just like a big snowstorm hit the U.S. economy. That is a load of hooey. It is something that we've never seen before, and I'm not sure we're going to get over quickly in 1 quarter or 2 quarters or 3 quarters. That's what worries me about what we're doing right now. Okay, these videos, you can get them delivered to your email address if you just, or a notification that a new one's come up if you subscribe. So if you like these things, just hit subscribe on YouTube and you can get them that way. Okay, I'm Andy Busch, trying to move my clients from chaos to confidence, trying to give you confidence about how to understand what's going on now and give you context and perspective of what can happen in the future. Let's all be optimistic because I think that's super important, but to also take everything that's happening, this optimism and this wave of positive that's happening right now with a big grain of salt.